Hello, my pups! Welcome to a new video. I know I've been absent for a long time, but please bear with me as I try my hand at podficking. My first ever podfic! Yay! A big thank you to Texiliaz for giving me permission to create this podfic. The fic I'll be reading today is The One They Call Broccoli. It has 48 chapters, 265,447 words, and counting. A link to the fic is in the description, so please go show Texilias some love. Let's hop right in with the summary. At first glance, being able to transform into a cat might not be so bad. And really, it wasn't. But you know what was bad? Having to keep your identity a secret from your mentors, who, unbeknownst to them, you've been living with as their pet cat since you were 12. It certainly didn't help that this quirk apparently had a time limit either. Oh, also, the ghosts living in One for All is certainly not helping. Watch Izuku struggle between keeping up his training and becoming a hero, while keeping his life as a human and as a cat separate from each other, as well as keeping it a secret from the two who are slowly becoming the most important people in both of his lives. Or, alternately, Aizawa picks up a stray cat and accidentally kidnaps a kid. We'll be reading Chapter 1 today, titled Welcome Home. Here are the author notes. Oh boy, here we go. Hello, everyone! I am really excited about sharing this story with you all. It's something that's been on my mind for such a long time. Before we begin, a bit of facts for the world in this fic. Toshi, All Might, is only a few years older than Aizawa in this fic. They are both in their 30s. He's still hurt from his fic with All for One, but not much has changed from canon. Well, other than his age and the fact he's living with and is in a relationship with Aizawa Shoto, and they both know about each other being heroes. Also in this story, the relationship between Shota and Izuku, as well as Toshi and Izuku, will be strictly platonic, father and son. Trigger warning! Brief mention of animal abuse at the beginning of the chapter. It's not too descriptive, but I still wanted to warn about it. There won't be more scenes like that, though, after that scene. Also, child neglect/abuse. Inko is a bad mother in this story. I'm so sorry, Inko. I love her so much, but for this story, she needed to be bad. She's not physically harming him, but she is neglectful. But with that said, hope you enjoy this story. When Izuku was 4, he was diagnosed quirkless. That was also around the same time his dad left and his mother stopped caring about him. Sure, his mom would keep a roof over his head and occasionally even food on the table, but nothing more. For years after that, he was bullied horrendously by the people around him, peers and even teachers alike. His quirklessness earned him the nickname Deku, meaning useless. Shortly speaking, Izuku was truly all alone. The world wasn't kind to the quirkless, after all. But then, when Izuku was 12, he gained a quirk. And while he had always wished for one, this was not how he had imagined it to go. He had been on his way home when Kanchan and his lackeys had cornered him. Nothing new had happened that day, and he doesn't understand what had triggered it. Izuku had simply curled up, making himself appear as small and unthreatening as possible, while taking the painful burns and waiting for Kanchan to grow tired of him, when suddenly his body exploded in a new sort of pain. Suddenly, the angry blonde had stopped in his tracks, and he had stared down at him with wide eyes, seemingly frozen in place. "What the fuck?" the boy had hissed, pointing at him with a giant finger. Izuku blinked in confusion, as everything seemed disoriented. The world around him looked wrong. Everything was too big, too loud, and kind of dull and blurry. He squinted his eyes and tried to stand up, only to immediately fall over on all four paws? He looked down at where his hands should be, seeing instead 2 paws covered in an unnaturally green-colored fur. He tried to yell out in confusion, but his voice wouldn't come out right, and the sound he let out sounded far from human. That seemed to snap the other kids out of it as they all sneered at him, walking closer and cowering over him. Well, would you look at that? Deku finally got a quirk, and it's just as useless as he is, one of them said, making the others laugh. Yeah, what the hell is turning into a stupid cat supposed to be good for? Hey, Bakugo, did you know about this? Kachan, who had just been staring at him, finally seemed to snap back at that, and he snarled at him. Hell no! Deku, you fucker! You had a quirk this whole time? Izuku just shook his head frantically, backing further into the corner of the alley. He tried to speak, but all that came out was pathetic mewls. His mind was racing. Did they say I was a cat? Is it someone's quirk? Why do they think it's mine? It can't be mine, right? Suddenly, one of the lackeys picked him up, and he screeched as he was suspended high above the ground. He blindly swatted his hand paw at the kid, and must have scratched them because the next thing he knows, he hears a hiss of pain as he's being dropped to the ground unceremoniously. Huh, I guess cats do land on their feet, he had half a mind to think, as his body seemed to automatically move around in the air and let him land on his feet. Though that didn't last long, as the next second, the hard surface of someone's shoe hit Izuku square in the stomach. The force of their kick was so hard that it sent Izuku flying into the wall of the alley. He gasped painfully at the impact as he landed on the ground. He heard the kids laugh, and he let out a painful mewl as his whole side hurt. Through the pain, he thought he heard Kachan speak. Guys, come on, that's enough. That's enough! A rough voice bellowed from somewhere further down the alley. Izuku blinked blurry eyes open, looking for the source. He could see someone walking towards them. A man? He was dressed in mostly dark clothes, except for his white scarf? His hair seemed to be floating, and his eyes glowed red. The person was tall, much taller than the already towering middle schoolers were, and he seemed pissed. Izuku tried to crawl further back against the wall, but that just led to more pain, and he let out a whimper of pain as he fell back on his side. The red eyes weren't looking at him, though. No, instead, they were firmly looking at the kids as the man moved to stand between Izuku and his bullies. The kids were saying something, but Izuku couldn't hear what exactly they were saying. What he did hear, though, was the man growling at them. Get out of here, now, and I swear, if I ever see you kids harm a defenseless animal again, I will arrest you as classified villains. Your age does not matter. Are we clear? This threat was followed by a horde of scrambling footsteps, and soon Izuku was left alone with his mysterious rescuer. Izuku closed his eyes, whimpering again. He heard footsteps closing in, and then a sharp intake of breath, followed by some soft cursing. Shit, they really did a number on you. You okay, little guy? The man hissed. He felt a large hand carefully settle next to his head, nudging him. Izuku blinked his eyes open and looked up slowly, taking in his rescuer's face. Izuku noticed, with some confusion, that the man did not, in fact, have red eyes. Instead, they were dark gray, almost black, and they were staring down at him with such worry and care that Izuku had ever seen aimed at him in his entire life before. His raven hair also wasn't floating anymore, instead laying draped down over his shoulders. The man looked overall tired and kind of scruffy, but his eyes looked kind. And considering he had just saved Izuku, the man had to be a good guy, right? I'm gonna pick you up now, alright? Please don't scratch me, the man said softly, as if he actually believed that a cat could understand him. Hands reached under and around him, and Izuku tensed as he was being hoisted up into the air, flinching at his new bruises. Still, the man was very gentle, and slowly he pulled Izuku up against his chest, cradling him close. He could hear the man's heartbeat next to his head, and the sound was oddly soothing. There we go. You're okay. The man shushed him gently, and Izuku felt like crying at the kind treatment, burrowing his face into the man's shirt right under the strange scarf around his shoulders. Izuku didn't even notice passing out until he woke up hours later in a foreign place. His eyes flew open as he looked around himself in the unfamiliar room. He was laying on some sort of bedding on the floor. He looked down at himself and, sure enough, still a cat. He huffed a bit in frustration. Oh good, you're awake. Izuku's head whipped around, seeing the same man from before step into the room, closing the door behind him. I had a friend come over and heal some of your bruises. She has a healing quirk, but it makes you very tired. You've been asleep for 5 hours. Izuku's eyes widened at that. 5 hours? He briefly wondered if his mom worried, but then shook away that thought, knowing the answer would be no. He was brought out of his thoughts as the man kneeled beside him, reaching out a careful hand and laying it next to Izuku's head. Izuku tilted his head and looked at it, glancing between the man and the hand, not really knowing what to do. The man's lips twitched a little, and he retreated his hand. All right, then. I'm Shoto, by the way. I didn't see any callers, so I hope you don't mind that I took you home. The man, Shota, said softly. Did he seriously think he could talk to animals? Wait! Maybe that's his quirk! Filled with a bit of hope, Izuku tried to sit up, wobbling a bit before he found his balance. He looked at the man and tried talking, letting out small meows. Can you understand me? The man just looked amused, though, his eyes crinkling at the edges as he stared at Izuku. Damn, you're cute. Izuku felt his ears lay flat down against his head, his hope lost. Sorry, just saying how I see it, Shida huffed, chuckling lightly. And such a strange color, too. I've never seen a green cat before. Could it be a quirk? He mused, looking Izuku up and down. At that, Izuku perked up and he eagerly nodded his head. Shota froze at that, staring at him. Wait, you can understand me? The man asked, frowning a bit as he tensed. Izuku was just about to nod again, but then he took in the man's expression. Why did he look so uncomfortable all of a sudden? Was the fact that Izuku understood him bad, somehow? He needed to tell Shota the truth, right? But then, would he still be nice to him? Or would he attack Izuku like everyone else? Would he view him as weak? As useless? Maybe being a cat wouldn't be so bad, right? So, with a heavy heart and a sour taste in his mouth, Izuku didn't respond. He simply turned away his head and looked around the room, trying to act as nonchalant as possible, even though his heart was hammering in his tiny chest. The man let out a small sigh. Right, okay. Must be some color mutation, or perhaps some other sort of quirk, Shota mumbled. Then he did that weird hand thing again, holding it to Izuku's face. It suddenly clicked what the man expected him to do, and he was really happy that he couldn't blush in this form, because his whole face would surely be on fire. Carefully, Izuku bumped his head against Shota's hand, stroking it gently against him. This earned him a smile and a small chuckle as the man moved to scratch Izuku behind the ears. Okay, yeah, being a cat will probably not be so bad, he thought, leaning into the touch. I think I'll name you Broccoli, the man mumbled, and Izuku had to hide a flinch at that. I take it back! When Shota left, Izuku started exploring the room. It seemed to be an office of sorts. Only a desk, chair, computer, and a few bookcases, and the cat bed was in there. The man had mentioned having other cats as well, but had said something about keeping him quarantined for a while, and so he had closed the door and left Izuku alone. With not much else to do, Izuku tried getting used to his new, strange body. Walking on 4 legs sure felt weird, but after a while he found it getting easier. Jumping up on the desk had only ended it with him completely missing his target and falling off the side. Apparently, cats were nearsighted. Huh, who knew? Izuku shook his head, trying again this time and getting it right, landing on the surface of the desk and then pausing as he saw his reflection on the computer screen. It wasn't the best mirror, but it was the best he could get for now. He really did look like a small and very fluffy cat. The only thing indicating he wasn't normal was his green fur. Izuku had never owned a cat before, but he would guess he was relatively smaller than an adult cat would be. He was probably a kitten, most likely. Izuku frowned at his new form and jumped a bit as he saw his ears fall back on his head and his tail give an annoyed swipe. This would certainly need some getting used to. He jumped down from the desk and landed on all fours. It almost looked graceful. Now, the question is, whose quirk made me like this? It can't possibly be mine, right? I don't have one and it can't possibly manifest this late in life, right? The door opened and Izuku flinched, running under the desk to hide. Shit, sorry, Broccoli. Didn't mean to scare you, Shota said softly, closing the door and crouching down next to the desk. I brought you some food and new water. I'm going to head out on patrol soon. Izuku peeked out from his hiding place, staring at the man. Patrol? He then looked the man up and down, taking a few steps forward to see better. That's when he noticed the yellow goggles around the man's neck, barely visible from under the white scarf. Capture weapon! Izuku realized, eyes widening as he remembered the floating hair and red eyes from when he first saw the man. Holy shit! Shota is a racerhead? I got rescued by a racerhead? He felt himself starting to vibrate in place with excitement. He's so cool. He's basically fighting quirkless and he's such an amazing quirk. Oh my god! Izuku was brought out of his rambling thoughts by the sound of the man chuckling. What got you so excited? Shota asked, sounding amused. I don't think I've ever heard such a loud purr before. Izuku froze. Oh, right. Cat. Anyway, I gotta go, but my partner will be home. I've asked him to give you space, though, so he shouldn't bother you. Just meow really loudly if you want him to check on you, I guess. Shota then reached out a hand to pet him, and Izuku happily leaned up into the touch, hearing himself purr loudly. He hadn't even realized how touch-starved he had been before now, but he feared he might become addicted to this. Shota returned sometime in the early morning, only to almost immediately have to leave again to go to his other job. When did this man sleep? It was soon after Shota and his partner had left that Izuku started feeling a bit weird. It felt uncomfortable to be in his own skin, and he started squirming as he was feeling a strange ache spreading all over him. Then, with a poof of smoke, he was suddenly back. Izuku gasped, eyes widening when he heard an actual gasp exiting his mouth. I can speak again, he stammered, bringing a hand Oh god, my hands are back, up to his throat. He looked down at himself and was a bit confused, but also relieved to see that it seemed like his clothes had transformed with him. He was still wearing his school uniform, just like he had the day before. What's going on? Izuku was so confused. It's not like he wanted to stay a cat forever. Only, well, he guessed he hadn't exactly minded the idea when he thought he was stuck like that. But now, he couldn't possibly stay here. Shota would take one look at him and throw him out. He didn't want Izuku the kid. He wanted Broccoli, the cat. Even as stupid as that name may be, Izuku would take being called Broccoli every day over having to leave the only person who had ever been kind to him. When he realized he couldn't stay with Shota anymore, Izuku curled up into a tight ball and sobbed. Then, with another poof, he was small again, green fur covering him as he was back to being a kitten. He sat up instantly, looking down at himself in shock. I can control it? Poof. He was back to being human, and he groaned. Or, uh, kind of. But still, Izuku felt a bit of hope at that, because if he could control this power, didn't that mean it had to be his quirk? He finally got a quirk! After all these years! He tried turning back into cat form, curling up and thinking small, And after a couple of frustrated tries, he felt himself switch back and he grinned brightly. It didn't take long before he started growing nauseous, though, and he was forcibly switched back. His mind instantly tried to analyze it. Maybe there's a short sort of time limit, like only a certain amount of hours before my body has to go back. I was in cat form for a long time, after all. Izuku glanced at the clock on the wall of the room, and his eyes widened, noticing it was soon 8 o'clock. I was a cat for 15 hours? He also realized that his classes would start soon. For a moment, Izuku considered just not going. Instead, just staying here forever and never leaving the house. But he couldn't become a hero, much less get into UA, without finishing middle school. He needed to go if he wanted to reach his dream. So, with a heavy heart and a resigned sigh, knowing he would get scolded by his teachers for being late, Izuku got up. He made his way over to the window. Looking out, it seemed like he was on the second floor. The drop ain't that high. I could probably make it in cat form, right? He could, in fact, make the jump, but it still hurt a bit when he landed. Izuku just transformed back into human form and kept walking, though, making sure to memorize which apartment as well as which window he had jumped out of. His phone was surprisingly still in his pocket, and he brought it out, checking the map. He really shouldn't be disappointed that his mom hadn't even tried to contact him, but it still hurt to see how empty his notifications were. Sadly, he had lost his school bag, as well as his shoes. Was there some sort of limit to how much can be transformed with me? Wait, where did my clothes go and phone even go when I was a cat? Shaking his head, he decided not to question it. Not right now. Not when there were more pressing issues, like how he was supposed to explain to the school that he lost his bag and shoes, and how he would get his mom to agree to getting him new ones. Like Izuku had suspected, school had been awful. Of course, the teachers had scolded him, and he had been sent to the principal's office immediately. There, he had been scolded by him, too. Apparently, someone had found his bag and shoes behind the school and brought them in, which Izuku was grateful for. But the principal didn't even care to ask why he had lost them, and instead just called him reckless and stupid for losing them in the first place. Izuku bit his lip and just nodded to whatever the man said, having learned it wasn't worth fighting back. When he finally had been let go, the next problem showed up. Namely, Kachan. Deku! The boy snarled, grabbing him by the collar and dragging him into one of the bathrooms. Izuku flinched, but otherwise didn't fight. Kachan slammed the door closed behind him, cornering Izuku. What the hell was that yesterday? Since when do you have a fucking quirk, huh? Shrinking back into himself, Izuku looked down at the floor. Since yesterday? He said, voice low as he brought up his hands to fiddle with the straps of his bag. The other boy did not seem happy with the answer. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? He asked, leaning closer and into Izuku's personal space. Izuku felt something inside of him snap, and he frowned down at the floor, clenching his fist. Kachan, I don't know what to say, okay? That has never happened before. Suddenly I was just small, and then this morning I got back to normal. He snapped, briefly glancing up at the boy and catching a bit of a surprise face before he looked away again. I, think I can still turn back and forth, but there seems to be a limit, he added in a mumble, all heat gone from his voice. After what felt like forever, Kachan finally moved, crossing his arms. Fucking stupid, such a weak power, he muttered. Izuku shrunk further into himself. He couldn't help but agree. So, what now? You still plan to be a hero? Kachan asked. It was the most civil Izuku had heard him since ever. Izuku knew the answer immediately. Yes, he said, no hesitation despite his nervous stammer. This was something he would never waver on, after all. Kachan growled at that, letting his arms fall down to his sides and explosions going off in his palms. God damn it, you fucking idiot! How the hell do you think that will work, huh? Just turn into a stupid tiny cat and hope the villains will stop? He yelled angrily, his hands shaking. I'll fight quirkless, like Eraserhead, Izuku argued. That just seemed to confuse the other boy, and he stopped, looking at Izuku with a blank expression. Who? He asked. Izuku took a deep breath. The man who saved me yesterday. He's a pro hero, he answered, feeling a smile tug at his lips at the memory of his rescuer. It didn't seem like Kachan was impressed, though. Ha! That hobo? He snarled, crossing his arms again. Izuku didn't like that description, but he nodded anyway. At that confirmation, Kachan growled. Are you serious right now? Do you not realize how stupid you sound? You're a fucking useless Deku! With that, Kachan shoved past him and went out of the bathroom. For a while, all Izuku could do was stand in the bathroom, staring at the door that the boy had disappeared out of. Huh, no burns. That's new. After school, Izuku hurried home to drop off his stuff. His mom was there, but she barely looked up at him when he called out his presents. He left his bag, cell phone, and shoes at home, as well as changed into a hoodie and some sweatpants before simply heading back out and over to Shota's house, hoping he would make it there before the man got home. So, apparently, getting up to a second floor window was a lot harder than getting down from one. Izuku sat in the grass, while in cat form, looking defeatedly at the window so far up in the air. Broccoli? Izuku's ears perked up and he turned around to see Shota walking towards him, a tall, blond, and thin man by his side. They both had grocery bags in their arms and were staring at him with slightly wide eyes. Shota looked up at the window, then back at Izuku, and then back up again, eyes growing wider. How the hell? He hissed, before shaking his head and walking closer. Never mind. Are you okay? That's quite a fall for such a little guy. Izuku walked up to him and met him halfway, purring happily at the sight of the man. So this is Broccoli, huh? I can certainly see why you would name him that. A new, amused voice called. Izuku turned his head and met the blue eyes of the other man. He looked a bit scary, with his sunken eyes and thin form, and Izuku found himself instinctually hiding behind Shota's legs, pressing against him as he kept his eyes on the stranger. This made Shota chuckle, and Izuku felt a bit bad when the blonde man's face fell. It's okay, Broccoli. Toshi might look a little scary, but he's harmless. I promise. Promise. Toshi, as the man was apparently called, muttered out I wouldn't say harmless, which did not calm Izuku's nerves. But he did step forward slightly, trusting Shota. I have no idea how you got out, but let's get you back inside, alright? Shota gestured for Izuku to follow him as he started walking. Izuku followed immediately. He seems rather intelligent, Toshi hummed from behind them, making Izuku stumble a bit before he righted himself and kept walking like nothing happened. I suspect that he might have a quirk, but I'm not sure, Shota answered, unlocking the door and letting Izuku inside. Oh, like Nezu? God, I hope not, Shota groaned. But yes, kind of like Nezu. He certainly seems to react to things in a peculiar way. Izuku wondered briefly who this Nezu was, but was soon interrupted from his thoughts as something moved further down in the apartment. He felt his fur stand on edge, and he backed away, growling slightly at whatever was in there. Shh, it's okay, Broccoli, it's just our other cat. That made Izuku relax a bit, remembering that Shota had mentioned already having a cat from before. But then he tensed again as a white cat, that was much bigger than him, stalked closer, blue eyes staring him down like he was prey. Wait, aren't cats, super territorial? Is this how I die? He suddenly felt very, very small, and he shrunk back, cowering as the adult cat stepped closer and started sniffing him. Then, he heard a purr and felt the cat bump their head against him, stroking their face against Izuku's in a loving fashion. He heard Toshi give a loud "aww" at the action, and Shota chuckled. So much for my plan on slow introductions. You two aren't supposed to meet yet. Oh well, Broccoli, meet Slushy. She is your older sister now, the man said fondly. Okay, it's official. This man is awful at naming pets. Slushy? Really? But despite this ridiculous name, Slushy was really kind to Izuku, and even though Izuku wasn't a real cat, Slushy still felt like a caring older sister in how she took him under her wing. Huh? She immediately started showing him around the apartment. There was the office that he woke up in before, a kitchen, a main bedroom, a guest bedroom, a bathroom, and a living room. During the evening, Toshi had tried to pet him a few times, but Izuku just scrambled away, hiding behind either Slushy or Shota. It's not that he didn't like the man, but he was just so big and scary to Izuku like this, and so he just automatically ran away when he saw him. Shota stepped up to Toshi, laying a hand on his shoulder. You need to approach slowly from the front, and don't try to pet him. Try instead to just sit down while offering your hand and let him come to you. I know Slushy trusted you immediately, but she's also older and much more calm. This is a scared kitten. Also, treats might help, he explained gently. Toshi nodded, looking sheepish but determined as he sat down and offered his hand with some cat treats. Izuku still didn't budge, though Slushy was immediately there and tried to nab the treats, earning a surprised yelp from Toshi and a laugh from Shota. It was getting late, and Izuku wondered how long Toshi was planning on staying, or when Shota's partner would get back home so he would meet them. They were watching a movie, Shota and Toshi sitting on the couch, while Slushy and Izuku were curled up on an armchair. He picked up a noise and he turned his head just in time to see Shota and Toshi kissing. Passionately. Oh, Izuku thought, eyes widening. Shota let out a content sigh, and Izuku just went, Nope, as he scrambled off the armchair and hurried into the office to hide. Not staying for that. He quickly learned that he could stay in the cat form for about 14 to 15 hours before he was forced back. The same rule seemed to apply to his human form. If he tried to stay in one form too long, his body would start to ache and he would forcefully change. After a week of coming home and finding broccoli outside, even after they had made sure to lock all the doors and windows in the morning, Shota and Toshi decided to just install a cat door so Izuku could come and go as he pleased. They gave him a yellow collar with a name tag and info tag, as well as a chip that would let him in the cat door so no other cat could enter. He had been nervous the first morning when he turned back into human form while wearing the collar. But luckily, it just simply fell off of him, and he picked the unharmed collar up. From the ground and pocketed it. It was getting tedious to go home to his mom's place only to use it as a storage for school stuff, so he started looking for alternatives. And after much looking, he found a hiding spot. There was an old storage hut near the park between his school and his new home, and after some investigation, he found that one of the broken vents could be opened, and it had enough room to fit quite a bit of stuff. Not the best hiding place, but it would have to do, and he decided to use his stuff, and he decided to hide his stuff there. At least it was pretty hard to find, and really no one used the old storage anyway. And hey, anything was better than having to go home to see his mom. She still hadn't asked him where he was spending the nights, even after weeks of him being gone every single night. It almost seemed like she was disappointed every time he walked through the door. He still got bullied at school. The other kids didn't care he had a so-called quirk now. Some students, even teachers, claimed it to be fake and made up, like he lied about having a quirk now for attention. But the thing is, Izuku never claimed to have a quirk, and he had no intention of proving anything to anyone at school. He didn't feel nearly safe enough to be that small and vulnerable around them, not after what happened the last time. Izuku never even got the quirk registered. He knew he probably should do that, but he didn't know how, and he couldn't exactly ask his mom or the school for help. So he simply didn't register it and stayed quirkless in the eyes of the public. He could always try registering it when he got older, he guessed. His days truly began after the school day ended. He would run out and shake off the bullies. Then he went to the park to leave his things in his hiding place and then head straight home. Not to his mom's place, but home. There, he would spend an hour or so with Slushy, just lazing around the house while they waited for Shota and Toshi to get home. Sometimes he would spend this hour in his human form, doing his homework. It was a bit tricky finding hiding places for the papers, but he somehow managed to sneak them in and out of the office without any of the two men living there noticing. Slushy had been a bit spooked the first time he changed form, but after he had let her sniff him, and she had confirmed that Izuku was okay, she had instantly relaxed and curled up in his lap, purring loudly. It took a couple weeks before he had finally grown comfortable enough around Toshi to let him pet him. The smile the man had given him was so big and blinding, and before Izuku knew what he was doing, he had run away and hid at the sight. He heard Shota scold his partner for showing teeth, which apparently is a big no-no around animals. After much coaxing and treats, Izuku finally let him try again, and this time the man kept his mouth closed as he smiled gently at him. His eyes were basically shining as he looked between Izuku and Shota while he scratched him behind his ear. Izuku guessed that Toshi wasn't that bad after all. Though the men still scared Izuku from time to time, which made Izuku feel bad because it was obvious that Toshi wasn't a bad man. But he was still a bit scary. The man was clearly very sick. Izuku had seen a huge scar on the side of his chest while the man got changed one morning. He was also coughing up a lot of blood, which was worrying. But even more worrying was how not worried the man seemed about it. He would just wave off any and all concerns. Shota handed him some tissues and a glass of water. One Sunday, about a month after he had moved in with Shota and Toshi, both of his caretakers, owners, dads, whatever, both men were out of the house working, so Izuku found himself having the apartment all to himself. He'd changed back into his human form and was lazing around on the couch watching TV. Slushy was curled up on his chest, purring loudly in her sleep. It was peaceful. Then, that peace was broken by the sound of the front door unlocking, and Izuku had barely a second to react and racked and changed back into the form of a kitten before the door opened and Shota walked inside. Unfortunately, Slushy was still lying on top of him when he transformed, and when he turned small, he ended up getting kind of crushed under the weight of the adult cat. Slushy, Broccoli, What are you doing, Slushy? The man quickly rushed over and lifted up a disoriented, just barely awake Slushy off of Izuku's struggling, smaller form. Slushy, you need to play more gently with the little guy, Shota grumbled, putting Slushy in his lap and sitting down next to Izuku. The man was patting his back as the kitten tried to regain his breath. Well, it's a good thing we're already going to the vet, I guess, the man muttered, while still stroking Izuku's back. At that, Izuku froze, and he knew Shota felt it when he heard him swear next to him. Shit, don't tell me you recognize that word, he hissed. It's not bad, I promise. They just need to check that you're healthy, he continued, more calmly, still petting him and trying to reassure him that it was fine. But Izuku felt far from fine. He was terrified. What if they figure out I'm not a real cat? In his panic, he almost didn't hear the man mutter his next words. Well, they will also need to neuter you, but it's a fairly quick procedure. Nope! I am out! Izuku threw himself off the couch, screeching as he booked it to the bathroom and hid. He heard the man shout behind him, but he ignored him. Broccoli? Crashing into the bathroom, he didn't even think as he kicked the door closed behind him, then turned back into his human form and locked the door before immediately turning back into a kitten and hid behind the sink. He heard thundering footsteps. Broccoli, where did you... What the fuck? Did you just lock the door? The man almost screamed, sounding dumbfounded and in shock. It would have probably been funny if Izuku wasn't so terrified. Why did I run in here? There's no windows in the bathroom. Oh god, I'm trapped. What do I do? To Izuku's surprise, though, Shota just sighed, and it sounded like he sat down outside the door. He then heard him, presumably, talking on the phone with someone. Hey, yes. Could you come over? Yes, I am afraid so. Uh-huh. Okay, I'll wait. Bye. There was silence for a while, neither moving. Then he heard Shota sigh again. Sorry for scaring you, little guy. I shouldn't have said the V word. Oh no, you definitely should have said it. How else would I have known to run? Izuku thought, his eyes falling back on his head as he out a small his ears falling back on his head as he let out a small growl. The man chuckled at the sound. Guess I deserve that. Look, I've asked a friend to come over. He's very good with animals, and he's been wanting to meet you anyway. I promise we won't try anything weird, alright? As if on cue, the buzzer to the apartment rang. Izuku jumped slightly at the sound. That's probably him, Shota muttered, getting up and letting the stranger inside. Izuku could hear voices talking, two being Shota and Toshi, but then a third that he didn't recognize. Footsteps grew closer, and he backed further into the corner. He heard Shota through the door. We're coming in now, alright? Please don't try to run, the man sighed. There were some sounds of scraping metal, and then the lock to the bathroom unlocked. Izuku twitched at that. How did he do that? Izuku couldn't stop the growl escaping him when Shota stepped into the bathroom. The man clicked on the light, and Izuku hissed at the sudden brightness, closing his eyes. Shh, it's okay, kitten. Nezu would like to talk to you. I'll leave you two alone, but me and Toshi will be right outside the whole time, he said gently. Izuku didn't answer, and he heard footsteps walking away, followed by a door clicking closed and murmurs on the other side. For a while, it was quiet. Then Izuku heard a cheerful voice speak up. Hello there, the voice said, and Izuku blinked, his eyes open, and looked up to find a giant rat? Izuku found himself staring dumbly at the creature before him. The rat was more than twice as big as him and dressed in fancy clothes. It was crouching not even a meter away from him, looking at him with a gaze so intense it seemed like it was trying to dissect him with its eyes. Suddenly, it smiled at him. Am I a dog or a mouse or a bear? No matter. More importantly, I'm the principal of UA! The thing cheered, and before Izuku could stop himself, he found his eyes widening at the mention of UA. The principal of UA? Holy shit, this is Nezu! I see that you recognize the school. Perhaps from the look in your eyes, you even recognize who I am, too, Nezu said knowingly, scooting closer and smiling at him. Izuku froze, feeling panic settle in his chest as he looked up at Nezu. Oh no, is he gonna tell Shota? He felt himself starting to shake, curling into himself. Hush now, it's all right, little one. I don't know where you hide your intelligence, but I assure you that no one here means you any harm. Now, can you speak? I'd love to have a chat with you. Izuku considered him for a while. It didn't seem like he knew Izuku was a human disguised as a cat, but instead a cat with an intelligence quirk. Or maybe he suspected the truth, but didn't want to force Izuku into outing himself? Izuku didn't know if he could trust him, though. With much reluctance, Izuku shook his head no, thinking it might be best to act as a cat who can understand speech, but not talk. For now. My, I certainly understand why Eraserhead talked about you. Such intelligent eyes, Nezu said, looking intrigued. Izuku would have flushed under the praise if he could. Now it only made him shift slightly in place, laying his ears back as he looked away. Well, anyway, I'm guessing you want to keep your level of awareness a secret from your current caretakers? Izuku nodded at that, curling into himself more. I see. But are they treating you well? Do you feel safe with them? At that, Izuku's head snapped up and he almost gave himself whiplash with how fast he nodded. Please don't take me away from them. Nezu smiled brighter at that, looking relieved. That's good. Well, something must have given you quite a scare, though, to lock yourself in the bathroom and make Eraserhead call me like this. I'm guessing you can't tell me, so how about we go out there and speak to them so we can sort this out? Izuku watched him for a while, considering. Then, when he saw no malice, he moved out from under the sink and followed Nezu out of the bathroom. Shota and Toshi sat on the couch, petting Slushy and looking anxious. Both of their heads snapped up when they saw them walk over. No one said anything while Nezu walked over to the armchair and climbed up to sit down. The creature looked down at Izuku. He glanced at the others for a moment before he jumped up in the armchair sitting next to his new friend? Shota cleared his throat. So, how is he? The man asked, glancing between them. Izuku immediately tensed, and on reflex, he moved his head away, looking around the room. He could see Nezu watching him, and he glanced at him, meeting his eyes. Well, this little guy is certainly no ordinary cat, he started, turning his gaze from Izuku to the others. No offense to the one over there. he added kindly, but Slushy didn't seem to mind. Just laid on Shota's lap and purred. So he's like you? Toshi asked carefully. No, not exactly, he answered, looking between them. For one, he doesn't seem to be capable of speech. I'm also not sure on what his level of intelligence lies, after just such a short meeting. But I assure you, he is indeed aware of what's happening around him, more so than most of his species. So, a quirk, then, Shota sighed. Nezu nodded. Most likely, yes. They all looked at Izuku, and he squirmed a bit in place, hiding behind Nezu. May I ask what you said that made him so upset? That way we can prevent a relapse of today's events. At that, it was Shota's turn to look uncomfortable, and he hid his face in his capture weapon, petting Slushy absent-mindedly. I just told him we were going to the... He glanced at Izuku. Doctor. And I may have mentioned that he was getting fixed, and then he bolted. I didn't even think when I said it, but since I'd said the same thing to Slushy when we went to her, with her, but perhaps I should have had more consideration. Nezu sighed, putting his paws together. I see. Well, what's done is done. I honestly can't blame. Sorry, what was his name again? He asked, looking down at Izuku. Shota grimaced. Broccoli, he muttered. Toshi snickered next to him, and he glared at him before turning back to the two on the armchair. Should we... are you okay with that name? He asked Izuku, and he felt his eyes widen at the considerate question. The man looked a bit uncomfortable, and Izuku was about to look away, but then Nezu nudged him, telling him it was okay. Swallowing, Izuku nodded. He'd grown used to the name, after all. It's the name Shota gave me. Shota and Toshi both seemed a bit shocked that he was okay with it, but then they both just smiled at him. All right then, Broccoli, Shota said with a small grin. Good. Now, where was I? Ah, right. Now that we are aware of Broccoli's unwillingness for that procedure, I trust you won't try to bring him to any doctors or do anything against his will? There was a dangerous tint to the creature's voice, and Izuku felt himself shudder next to him. Of course not, both men answered at the same time, earning them an approving nod from Nezu. Good, good. That's all I wanted to know. He nodded, seeming pleased. They talked for a bit more after that, before Nezu left. Izuku followed him to the door, stroking against him before he went. Nezu smiled and petted him, telling him to let the two men know if he needed anything from him. After he was gone, Izuku turned to see Shota and Toshi watching him, and he froze. For a while, neither moved. Then Shota took a small step closer, then another. Izuku could feel himself starting to shake, and he briefly glanced at the cat door, wondering if he could make a run for it. The man said something, but Izuku couldn't hear him. He took a staggering step back, closing his eyes. This is it. They'll throw me out, thinking I'm a freak. They'll never want me here again. But then Izuku felt a hand on his head, and fingers cradling through his fur. He looked up, a bit confused and still very scared, expecting to see anger. Instead, the man just looked worried, giving him a small smile while he was watching him. He could finally hear him talking through the ringing in his ears. Hey, it's okay, little guy. We're not mad at you. You're okay. He murmured gently, and Izuku felt like crying if he could. Instead, he just started shaking more, and before he realized what he was doing, he had thrown himself at Shota, clutching himself to the front of his uniform. The man almost immediately gathered him in his hands and hugged him close, humming softly. Life continued on surprisingly well after that. There was a time period where both men had been a bit unsure around him, almost tiptoeing around him as they seemed unsure on how to act. But that had quickly changed after Izuku had, accidentally, torn a big hole in the couch, and Shota had not been happy with him. But honestly, Izuku hadn't been able to help himself. His claws were itching. After that, Shota had put him in timeout, which was just a giant cardboard box that was too high to jump out of. On the front, Toshi had written "Timeout Box" with a red marker, which Shota had then grabbed and added "For naughty cat brats" before he went to clean up the mess and grumbled about the stupid problem cat. The man did buy them a new climbing tree after that, though, one with plenty of places to sharpen his claws, which Izuku greatly appreciated. And as weird as their small group may seem, Izuku really viewed them all as family. Shoto was always there to reel them back if things got too heated or out of control. Toshi would always offer comfort and some extra snacks when Shoto wasn't looking. And Slushy was always keeping an eye on Izuku, helping him get used to his cat side. Before he knew it, weeks turned into months, which then turned into years. And he found himself having a hard time remembering life before he met these three. Izuku was happy, and he could finally understand what people meant when they talked about having a warm home. Unbeknownst to Izuku, that would all change after he turned 14 and started his last year in middle school. Everything would change the day when he met All Might. That's the end of the chapter. There are some author notes, which I'm going to read right now. So, what did you think? I already have most of the timeline drafted and written out, and I gotta warn you, we're in for a long ride though, folks. Please let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm seriously really nervous about this story, and all feedback is very much welcome. Hope you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. Updates might not be frequent, but I'll try my best to update to the best of my abilities. Take care, everyone. And that is the end of chapter 1, author notes and all, and the end of my first time doing a podfic. There are still 47 chapters to go, and chapter 1 was a lot longer than I remembered it. But I hope that everybody enjoyed it. Please tell me how I did. I know I stumbled a bit at some points. Sorry. But thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye. See you next time, pups.